Hi, and welcome to another episode of eCom at One. Today we welcome Rand Fishkin, the actual godfather of SEO, author of Lost and Founder, Moz founder, and the CEO at Sparktoro. How you doing, Rand?
Yeah, all right, Richard. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming on. I was just saying to Rand just before we hit record, we were planning on getting Rand on, and Rand happened to message me on another matter, and here we are, a couple of weeks later, episode 50. Thank you for agreeing to come on the podcast.
Oh my gosh, my pleasure.
So let's get straight into it. So what ignited your initial passion way back when for SEO that led to the development of SEO Moz?
Oh yeah, gosh, going back a long time. I was sort of forced into doing some SEO work because we were building websites at the time and unable to pay our SEO subcontractors. This is like 2002, 2003. And so I had to learn the practice myself. And the blog was just a natural kind of outpouring of my personal frustrations around how difficult SEO was to learn and do, especially at that time. You know, there was so few resources. The resources that did exist were very secretive and protective. I don't know if you recall in the early days of SEO, Richard, but there was a lot of people in the field who felt like sharing how they did what they did was not, content marketing. It was giving away their trade secrets.
The secrets.
Yeah, and so they were absolutely against that, and actually, I would say a healthy number of early influential people in the SEO field were very frustrated with SEO Moz's existence at all.
It was like the magician giving away secrets.
Yeah. There was a lot of like, shut up, don't talk about that stuff. And that was true both in the SEO world and from Google's side of things. When I left Moz, I remember I was like, oh man, I still have these emails, from Matt Cutts when he was a head of web spam team, emailing me and being like, stop inviting these people to speak at your conference. Like, don't do whiteboard Fridays like this. I wish you wouldn't blog about this stuff, blah, that kind of stuff. So there's, not everybody loves transparency.
Yeah. So it all started with the blog. And I can remember myself, I've been doing this for circa 20 years ish. And it was one of the first, the blogs, and then it obviously grew from SEO Moz to Moz, and grew into this huge sort of the number one SEO stroke content stroke, you name it, sort of SEO focused software. Obviously, that's a 20 years in SEO is a long time. Obviously seen everything, heard everything. I actually saw you speak at Search Love. I think it was 9 years ago, maybe in London.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Obviously, you've seen a lot. I actually read your book on holiday year before last. I was going to say last year, but we didn't go anywhere last year. So
no holidays.
But obviously your Lost and Founder book, amazing book. Recommend that to all the listeners that are listening in now. A real sort of no holds barred, real life, unedited version of the startup world and the world of setting up a business. It really resonated with me. I couldn't put it down. I have to admit, I couldn't put it down very much. That journey, I think it's just so interesting. From literally creating a blog. I remember, I think you were you were looking at office space like you do back in the day, and I think it's like several $1,000s for office space, or can we get do a bit of a deal and get a smaller office, and all that sort of journey from have we got a bit of an idea here, and then the next thing I think Moz's revenues are sort of 50 million or whatever they are a year. That's a bit of a made up number, but I think that's what I heard.
I think that, yep. I think it's right
somewhere
around
there. So if you had to say what was one thing that led to the success, from a startup idea, literally you and your keyboard, to the success it is now, what would be the one thing you think that led to that success?
I think lucky timing.
Yeah,
is the primary one. And unfortunately, a lot of startup success stories are post hoc attributed to the genius or the hard work or the amazing ideas of the founder, or whatever it is. I don't think so. Like I think most of Facebook's success is right time, right place, and decent execution, But I bet there were companies that executed just as well or better, but they didn't do it at exactly the right time. And so they didn't become Facebook. I think Moz is a lot like that. You know, Moz is a company that had, decent execution and, you know, I don't know, a mediocre talent in leadership, right? I had no idea what I was doing. I was really stumbling around in a ton of ways. I don't think I'm nearly as impressive or smart as many of the people who I've encountered in the search and technology and SaaS worlds. And the only reason my business became much bigger so fast was SEO was a practice that was being adopted at an incredibly rapid pace. Right around then, we hit the market sort of just with the perfect timing of being this resource that everybody turned to when everybody was getting into SEO. I think today, Moz is still regarded very well for sort of its, content and conferences and that kind of stuff. But the software is maybe a third place player in the SEO field.
We can say that now, can we? That's okay to say that now, because you
with me, the truth is always fine to say. Absolutely.
No, I would agree with you 100%. It was we were all Moz, or SEO Moz, SEO Moz. It launched as, for the listeners, it launched as SEO Moz, and then was it 2014? It changed its name.
I think 12
changed itself to Moz, and it was really, I think, like you say, that timing. There was the only software out there that would do what it could do, and there was nothing else even close to that timing piece. So I think you guys listening in, that idea that you may have, it might not be that crazy if it, it's timing, what's going on in that industry, new products to market, even more so now with what's happening with the pandemic. So many opportunities out there as e-commerce stores that, they might seem a little bit crazy, but crazy times we are in. So thank you for that. So now, obviously, the co-founder and CEO of Sparktoro. We, as an agency, have been using your software, your sort of audience intelligence platform for, I think, probably about 6 weeks or so. And my sort of outreach team, my link building team, my sort of content team, they are very much in love with your tool, I have to say.
That's great to hear.
So I think it'd be just great for you to give us a bit of an overview of what Sparktoro is, how it came about, and what it can do for e-commerce stores.
Yeah, absolutely. So the concept behind Sparktoro, the kind of benefit of using it is that you can instantly discover what any audience you might want to reach listens to, reads, watches, follows, talks about, how they describe themselves online. So if you're curious about people who are into tabletop games and you want to sell them a game product, you can find the communities that they pay attention to and who they're following on social media and which podcasts they're listening to and which YouTube channels they're subscribing to. And then you can do, whatever, better ad targeting, better digital PR outreach, better messaging, better listening, right? Social listening or content listening. You can, use smart hashtags in your social content as the kind of most tactical piece of something you might do. You can create content that's speaking to what they've been talking about over the last few months, which is what Sparktoro will show you. And this applies to very, very well in a lot of e-commerce sectors, right? So, we've had folks from a bone broth company in Austin to sort of fancy sneaker resellers to folks who are helping authors in book world, sell their books online and reach their communities, and hundreds of products beyond that. So the applications are very wide ranging and numerous. It is mostly marketers and market researchers who use the product, but it's pretty broad. And that's actually been a little bit of a challenge. I think with Moz, it was really nice. Like, do you do SEO? Do you need to, crawl your website every week and track your rankings and, get links and that kind of stuff? Okay, well, Moz does those things. Sparktoro is more of a, hey, this is an entirely new kind of software, new kind of data. Who's it for? What is it used for? The applications are very wide ranging, and the target market is very broad.
Yeah, I think you know, as you do as an agency, there's a lot of different tools out there for everything, you know, but this I think is it's a real find for us as an agency. Some of the things, like I say, we've been using it for not that long really, but I was before we came on the call, when you log in, obviously I can see what my team have been doing in it more recently. It's like, oh, okay. And obviously we have this podcast, obviously, and to be able to then, you know, look at the topic. If you've got a podcast and you listen to this podcast, an example where we've used it is to look at podcasts that potentially we could get on, you know, and in our industry that are very, very specific. And then one of the little strategies we've been doing as well is, so we use the tool to find the podcasts and the podcasts that are very, very relevant. But then also we then go to the podcasts, and then we go back to the sort of SEO days of getting the links and things like that. Which podcasts are doing transcriptions? So if we talk for an hour about e-commerce on a podcast, obviously we can find those podcasts with your tools and the better podcasts that have got the better affinity and, you know, are more, you know, targeted. But then if we know that an hour's worth of talking about e-commerce or Google shopping or e-commerce SEO is going to get transcribed onto that page, we've got 10,000 words that obviously is referring back to our brand on those podcasts. So that's just an example we've used it for in-house.
Yeah.
Which has been fantastic.
So I do a lot of podcast, you know, whatever, appearances and guesting and that kind of stuff. And my experience, Richard, has been that even those podcasts that don't give a link, in fact, many times the podcasts that don't give a link are just as valuable, if not more, than the ones that do. I'm not sure whether that is the case, that, you know, Google is as perfectly able to represent a brand mention of Sparktoro alongside market research or audience intelligence or whatever, you know, let's boost their rankings for their blog posts. I don't really know. I can't say for certain. If I were Google, I'd be doing it that way, because that's a far better signal, generally speaking, of quality than a raw link, which is often, well, you and I, you know from our SEO world, right, that oftentimes the link building aspect of it is the more manipulative side, and the brand mention side of it is often the more authentic one. And so I think there's a future where it's very likely that Google is going to, I don't want to say completely devalue links, but I think they will be more and more skeptical of them, and that brand mentions and branded search traffic and people talking about a brand and building affinity with brands, those will have kind of the link-like influence in the next decade that we saw links having in the last two.
Yeah, that's a great takeaway, Rand. Thank you for that. So the listeners of our podcast are e-commerce stores, and we very much have sort of a lot of chat about SEO and PPC, you know, Google ads, Facebook ads, and obviously with ads, targeting is a huge area. You know, the targeting of the ads is usually the key, obviously very much so on Facebook, for example, and obviously
they're just ruthless about how much data they've taken away and how impossible they've made it to do good targeting these days.
Oh, it's just getting tougher. It's making things more interesting, that's for sure. But obviously Sparktoro will sort of uncover audiences and help build audiences. So talk us through that. How can our listeners potentially use Sparktoro to uncover and target better opportunities tied to sort of e-commerce product type sets that we might be able to target for their ads?
Sure. Yeah. So Sparktoro is not so great for targeting kind of product level interest, but it is very good for finding audiences. Right. So one of the data pieces that you see inside of Sparktoro that's very relevant, for example, for Facebook ads or Google Display Network, is how an audience describes themselves, right? So these are essentially, you know, what Sparktoro does, for anyone who's not familiar, is it goes out to the web to 10 social networks and website about pages, right? And then it'll say, oh, here's Richard Hill on, you know, here's your public Facebook profile. And that points to this podcast page on iTunes. And there's a link in the iTunes RSS feed of the podcast that points back to your website. And on your website about page, that links to your Twitter and your LinkedIn and your Instagram and your YouTube. And all of these are all one profile for us,
Yeah.
right? So Sparktoro crawls all that data, throws away any personally identifiable information because we don't want to get in whatever GDPR trouble or California privacy law issues or whatever, but take all that data, aggregate it, and then make it searchable. So, Sparktoro's got about 76, 77 million-ish profiles, almost all English language right now. So apologies to folks who are searching in other areas, but and then you can query it and say, hey, I want to find people who have these attributes or who talk about these things on their social profiles or who follow certain accounts or use certain hashtags. And then it will give you data about them. So for example, if you're in e-commerce and you are
how about use an example of something we seem to be working on quite a lot in our agency at the moment is drinks brands. So let's say we are selling gin online.
Yeah. So for example, I was helping someone from, I think the website's Cocktail Kingdom.
Yeah.
Right. I don't think they actually sell alcohol, but they sell a whole bunch of, branded gear for at-home bartenders, which lots of people have been doing in quarantine, myself included, right? And so, so Cocktail Kingdom is selling whatever their shaker, their cocktail shaker, and a jigger, and a cocktail spoon, and glassware, and all of this kind of stuff. And so they want to find people who maybe follow at-home cocktail recipe websites. They want to find people who are using cocktail related hashtags. They want to find people who are talking about making cocktails at home, or who are maybe they're talking about a particular one. If you're selling gin, maybe you want to find people who have talked about corpse survivors in the last 90 days. I think one of the corpse survivors can be made with gin. Maybe it's number 2.
I'm not sure on that.
Yeah. I think it's corpse survivor number 2. So as you go in, Sparktoro can then say, okay, people who have talked about corpse survivor number 2 in the last 90 days, they share these attributes. 12% of them follow this page. Oh, great. Let me go take that page, plug it into my Facebook ad targeting options and see if I'm able to target people who have interest in that page. Oh, I'm not. Okay, let me go to the next one, one. Aha, I found one. Great, that's my audience. I want to go after them. Now you're getting smarter and more targeted and more niche than your competitors who have to go with the broad targeting options or who just go with Facebook's recommended option, which is give us all your money.
Yeah.
And you can do the same thing on the Google Display Network, right? Saying like, oh, I want to target this website in particular. I want to target these interests, right? So these are words and phrases people have talked about, or there's words and phrases they've used in their bio, right? So they might say, I don't know, I'm a cocktail aficionado. And you're like, ooh, let me type that in, see if that's available to me. Or they might say something like, I'm a, perhaps they say home chef. And you didn't realize, oh, home chefs have a lot of overlap with, okay, great. I'm going to put that in there and have that interest category. So that's a little of how the targeting works. And the way we think about it is very much all this data that all of the, monopolies, the duopoly of Facebook and Google are pulling away from marketers and advertisers. We want to try and give you that data back in a way that is anonymized, ethical. It's crawled data from, the same way that Google would crawl the web. We're crawling the web and social profiles. There's nothing special or fancy about it. There's no AI, no machine learning. Like, this is not a fancy algorithm. This is just, what do you know? 27% of people who talked about cocktails in the last 90 days follow this podcast.
Yeah. It sounds so simple when you say it like that, and I think the reality is it's within the interfaces themselves. It's getting harder and harder, and they're tightening, and you're losing targeting, or so many people are going after the same targeting, so therefore things are getting more and more expensive. What this enables you to do is to open some doors that do you know, I just didn't think of that. I just didn't think, there's 15 million people over here, or 100,000, hang on a minute. And it's 2p a click as opposed to £2 a click. So those doors.
Well, and sometimes, the tighter your targeting gets, And the more you create sort of, whatever specific ad groups or specific ad campaigns with specific messaging and specific landing pages, generally speaking, the more effective and efficient your advertising dollars are.
Yeah.
And this is also true on the organic side.
Yeah.
So if you are finding whatever it is, a podcast that talks about cocktail gear and you're the head of product design for Cocktail Kingdom's set, you can reach out, you can have someone from marketing reach out and say like, hey, would you like to have this person on as a guest? They'll talk about all the new things that's coming up in barware. Amazing, right? What an opportunity for, getting a few hundred or a few thousand people in there, getting that mention, potentially getting the link, getting the Google ranking boost, right? Just beautiful.
Beautiful. So we've got both sides. We've got ads. So targeting for ads to go off to the platforms and just dig that a bit deeper. But then we've got this side where, if you want to call it traditional SEO or content creation or podcast guests and so forth, obviously it'll uncover in a similar way, audience or topics to be talking about or people to be connecting with, without paid ads, whether that's, being a guest on a podcast, as we said a couple of times now, or creating a very niche piece of content that's it's not just, very broad, it's very specific about how to create your home gin bar with XYZ at XYZ sort of thing.
Sure. And I think some of the smartest content applications that I've seen in Sparktoro is folks recognizing that before an audience starts searching for a topic, they generally discuss that topic online. Right? So what happens is conversations start on Twitter, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on Reddit, in YouTube comments, in Pinterest, all these places, Instagram, and then it moves to a sort of broader awareness and there's search volume around it. But if you can be the person who's recognizing, oh, here's the conversations that are taking place in a sector. So that could be oh gosh, people are really curious about large format ice. Like that was a huge cocktail trend maybe a couple years ago in bars. And now it's starting to be something at home.
Yeah.
And so if you see that pop up, like, 5% of people talked about big ice, big honkin' ice cubes. I don't know exactly what the word for them are, but maybe that's something that deserves some content creation. Maybe you could order 10 different large format ice makers, that you put in your freezer, test them all out and write reviews of them.
Yeah.
And that could be something where there's very little search volume now, but you are at the cutting edge. And so when you produce that piece ahead of everyone else, you're the reference point. When you rank number one for something in search as it's trending up before it gets mainstream, everyone links to your piece, right? All the influential sources, they search for it, they find you, they link to you, and that reinforces your number one ranking.
Yeah.
That's really tough to beat.
That's gold dust. And I think that's so relatable to e-commerce, because e-commerce companies, quite often the products and manufacturers that they're representing have a product roadmap that they know ahead of time what is coming out in quite a lot of instances, depending on the size of the e-commerce store. So they can be even more ahead by looking, do you know what, there's a set of products coming out in 4 months that's related to XYZ. So that XYZ, what can we find that's discussion that's going to have that's going to connect to those products in 3-4 months, getting that content in the index way ahead of time, getting that getting those positions, those rankings way ahead of time, when there's maybe just a bit of chatter to start with in the first few weeks, and then 3-4 months when the products launch, you've been talking not just about the product but the associated products and that's genius, Rand. Thank you for that. That's really smart. So I think if as an e-com store listen to the podcast, Sparktoro, we use it in both of our agencies, and obviously for ads and for content creation, so many different ways of using the tools and the software there. So definitely go and check that out. So obviously, as I said, I've read your Lost and Found a book cover to cover. I think I missed a few cocktails on holiday during a few afternoons where well, maybe not actually. I think I had a flag on that holiday or brought to me maybe. But obviously a lot of real raw journey from startup to investment and so forth, and then going again, if you like, with Sparktoro. What advice would you give to our listeners that are maybe thinking about securing investment? So I know you've been there, done that, got the t-shirt and the quite a few stories there, obviously, that are in the book. But what would your advice to be? You're an e-commerce store, that listen to the podcast, and you may be at that point where you've got to a point or a level. You may be doing 10 million turnover, whatever your numbers are, 10, 20 million pound turnover, but you want to get to that maybe 50 million, 100 million, or whatever the numbers are. Yeah. What advice and what sort of things would you say to our listeners to think about?
Let's see. So my recommendation generally would be that you think very long and hard about why you want to go from 10 million to 50 million.
Yeah.
A lot of times that is prestige, right? Yeah. You sort of feel like you need the honor of it, and you want to be more important, and you want to be more, lauded in your communities and entrepreneur world and all of that, which look, that was me too, right? I have been there. But I think that the reality is that if you're raising institutional capital versus private investment, which in e-commerce world, there's actually a lot more options around private investment in sort of software and tech and healthcare and biosciences. A ton of it is very speculative sort of venture investment, which is, my understanding at least, much higher risk, right? E-commerce brands tend to have lower risk investment models. They're also not quite as generous and high reward. So I think you have to kind of carefully consider what it means to build a bigger company and a bigger business, and to aim for a higher growth rate rather than sort of profitable, stay small or niche. Both can be great, right? Both can be great. My experience has been that more people are very happy when they feel personally satisfied by and have a great journey with those smaller businesses.
Yeah.
And that is because you can sort of optimize for profit and take out the profits of the business and sort of pay yourself and oftentimes become, far more financially, it's far more lucrative for a founder or an executive team than those bigger companies where a lot of those profits and that growth has to be reinvested in order to satisfy your investors. So that I would just carefully consider it. Maybe give Lost and Founder a read. You'll find a few chapters that are specifically about sort of raising money and thinking about services versus product businesses and margins and growth. And I try not to be too, what do I want to say, financially focused, but also give the very real story of, here's the trade-offs.
So would you say then that you've made certain decisions back then that you wouldn't make now? You've definitely learned from that process. I think
Sparktoro did not raise any venture capital, and we never will. We did raise private capital. We got a number of folks, a lot of agency owners and people who built software companies, founders, invested in Sparktoro, put in 50 to 100 grand, and that investment structure is very unique. We designed our own investment structure, which you can, if you search for Sparktoro funding, we open sourced our documents, so you can see what those look like.
I was reading it not so long ago, actually. Well, I think it was an interview. It was an interview. I think did you say you had about 30 plus investors initially?
Yeah, 30. We have got 35, I think, 36 investors.
Yeah. So you've done it very differently this time around. Yeah.
And those are folks who, they put in whatever, 50 grand. And the concept is that over the next few years, as Sparktoro hopefully grows, becomes profitable, that we pay them back the money they've invested and then pay dividends out each year as we have profits, rather than lose it all or win big.
I think that's such an important point. The guys that are listening in there may be thinking about that investment. You maybe started in your bedroom, which is quite often the case with a lot of business, especially e-commerce. Do you know what? Let's let's just try and sell a few widgets online and list a few things on eBay. Fast forward 3 years, you're doing them, whatever it is, £1 million a month, £1 million a week. And then it's like, right, what's next? What's next? What's next? What's next? Right, we need more money. But why do you need that money? What are you going to use it for? But then what does that actually mean? What have you got to give up? You know, and the reason that journey, you know, has been yourself, and has been, you know, you've been able to do what you want in effect. Obviously you've got to work, but you've been able to make the decisions. You've been able to, you know, live on your terms. Of course you're working hard, as everybody does when they're doing their thing, and they're doing something that they enjoy and a bit passionate about. But once you get that investment in, depending on which way you go, or, you know, you're not necessarily in charge anymore, you're making the decisions anymore. And that's probably why you started it in the first place, is to grow something that's your own. But I think that second, obviously the way that you've that's the way that you've got investment in Sparktoro, that's a very, you know, that just sounds a lot more, I guess, friendly way. I don't know if that's even the right word, but just a nicer way of doing things. Of course, you've got commercial targets, and you're going to grow it, you know, as you already have. You know, you're coming up to a year, aren't you? Is it a year in a couple of months?
Yeah, that's right. We launched middle of April, so we're about 11 months in.
Yeah. So a big birthday party soon then. Okay. So there's some great takeaways. Thank you. So I think at the moment, obviously, more and more people, everybody is really working from home, you know, trying to motivate a team, trying to motivate yourself as a leader, you know, and obviously, and also to motivate a team. What advice would you give to leaders who are trying to motivate themselves at the moment and motivate their team? What advice would you give to them?
I mean, it might be an excellent time to think not exclusively about motivation and hard work. It might be a reasonable time to say, hey, this is, for most of the Western world, right? We've been in lockdown for a year or a little longer now. And many folks have worked longer and harder hours than they ever have before.
Yeah.
Have taken much less vacation, have had far fewer social outlets, have had massive stress, not only from the pandemic and the fear around that, but also from, child care issues and parental care issues and loved ones dying in the United States. Just half a million people plus passed away, and it's just a tragedy.
Yeah.
It's someone says a 9/11 every day. And that is exactly right. It is September 11th, airplanes crashing into the World Trade Center every day. Yeah. And everyone has lost people in their lives. So I don't know. A lot of me, when I go to how are we going to get motivated and, work harder and make more money? I'm kind of like, maybe we save that conversation for post-pandemic. Maybe we save that conversation for, after vaccine distribution. And right now is a great time to think, how do we talk about empathy? How do we talk about taking time off? How do we talk about getting more rest? How do we talk about being healthier and safer? Those are things that I would focus on. And oddly enough, American entrepreneurial attitudes are awful about this, but oddly enough, you and all of us are far more productive with 8 or 9 hours of sleep a night and healthy, eating and exercise habits and less work than we are with sacrificing those things and having more raw hours inputted. And this is because our decision-making improves, and the speed with which we can accomplish even complex information technology tasks, marketing tasks, creative tasks, all improve, right? We are not factory workers whose job is to place widgets onto lines or dig coal out of mines. We are making complex decisions that require excellent processing capacity, and that ability is governed and improved with sleep, rest, breaks, time off. Like Richard, I'm sure you've had this experience, right? You went on holiday a couple of years ago. I don't know. Let's say you're out of the office for 2 weeks. You don't really do a lot of work. Maybe check your phone a little bit. you come back and you're like, oh my God, there's 250 emails. There's so many projects. How am I ever going to get through this? I feel completely buried. And then you look up a week later and you go, my God, I just got 3 weeks of work done in 5 days. How did I do that?
Yeah.
And you know how you did that? Because you were well rested and you took a long vacation.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that time off, right? That break, that mental sorbet, that is an energy builder that you then get to spend. We are all batteries.
Yeah.
Right. And when we are running on empty, everything is slow, right? Replying to one email, filling out one Excel spreadsheet, going through one Sparktoro report to find the content marketing opportunities and the social media opportunities and the ad targeting.
Yeah.
Takes 10 minutes, to do one of those tasks instead of 60 seconds.
Yeah. I can relate 1000% completely relate. It is, yeah, some days are very, very tough. That is the reality of what we're in at the moment. Take a break, be kind to the team, to everybody, and just it's obviously not all about the work, is it? That's the
well, and even if it's all about the work, even if your exclusive focus is I want more better output, I want to be more competitive, then get your team lots of rest and breaks and time off. Yeah. Because you will be more competitive if they are better rested and more efficient and more effective. Yeah. And if you grind your team to the bone, you will not get the output and the results that you are seeking. Yeah. It's counterintuitive. It's hard for a lot of people to process because we have this mindset of like hard work means, good job. Nope. Sorry, friends. Yeah. Not in creative practices.
Completely on the same page with you there. I think we're going to have some great sound bites there for promoting the episode. Yeah, 100%.
Oddly enough, I have found when I share podcast stuff, audiograms that have captions and videograms too, right? They do really, really well on social. Like the native ones get more clicks and more engagement and all that kind of stuff, which I think the social networks, intentionally engineer because they want people to like consume it on the platform.
Yes, of course. They don't want you clicking off. They want you there, staying, sticking.
But even if it's one of those counterintuitive things. Even if you want people to click off the platform, don't share the thing that makes them click off the platform. Share the clip that shows you on, natively on the platform, and then, have the next reply or whatever be the share, or on LinkedIn it's like the first comment, or on sometimes in the audiogram itself it'll be like, oh, go to
it's in the video part rather than actually in the text with it.
Yeah, exactly.
So they're not seeing you taking them away, or they're not spotting that you're taking them away indirectly or directly. Yeah, thank you, Rand. So what is there anything that you could share with our listeners that's maybe what's next for Sparktoro on the roadmap, or for Rand yourself? What, some of the things that are coming up? So maybe any sort of heard it here first teasers you could let us have.
Sure. So let's see. We're working on a whole bunch of stuff. The podcast index of Sparktoro itself is growing quite a bit because that's something a lot of folks are using us for. So Casey's made a big investment there. I think we're going to double, maybe even triple the size of the podcast index that you can find. We are also adding German and Spanish language profiles toward the end of this year, because a lot of folks are asking about those two languages in particular, and a lot of localization all over. We are adding audience tracking. So this is basically the ability to say, oh, I'm really interested in, whatever, the cocktail audience online. And so I want updates every 2 weeks or every month about what they are doing, what's changing, what new hashtags are they using, what new YouTube channels they start following, what new podcasts started getting popular, what social accounts are suddenly, blossoming with them. What did they start discussing that they never were before? I think a lot of folks want that, like, hey, just send me the report, of what's changed and what's new. So that is a big thing.
That would be amazing. It'd be amazing. One thing that came to mind just to put on your list would be, when you do that, if you can do that, so it pushes it into Slack channels, that would be great.
Slack, it seems conceivably possible. Certainly Slack can input a All right, I'll talk to Casey. I don't know exactly how that would work. Maybe there's some sort of API output that Slack could consume. But the other stuff that's coming. So on my end, I am working on a new video series, and that hopefully will be launching sometime in the summer. So probably I'm going to be filming a bunch of the episodes in the spring and then starting to release them come summer. My hope is to have something that, is a little more in-depth and a little more polished than what Whiteboard Friday was, probably closer to series episode length, like 20-ish minutes, 22 minutes.
Yeah, great.
And digging into some tech and marketing topics.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, thanks, Rand. It's been an absolute blast. It really has. We do like to finish every episode with a book recommendation. If you could recommend one book to our listeners, what would that be?
Ooh, only one. I am, let's see. I'm a huge fan in the marketing world of April Dunford's Obviously Awesome.
Okay.
Best book about positioning you will ever read. If you don't know why positioning is super important and how it can sort of change the trajectory of your conversion rates online and your brand's perception, I highly recommend giving that book a read. It really changed my outlook and made me a lot smarter.
Right. We'll get that linked up in the show notes, and that'll be my next click after we've finished. I'll be getting that ordered. So for the guys that are listening that want to find out more about yourself and obviously find out more about Sparktoro, what's the best place to do that?
Yeah. So you can, anyone can set up a free Sparktoro account. You get 10 searches a month for free if you go to sparktoro.com and just start searching. I am most active on Twitter, where I'm at Randfish. And you can also find me blogging at sparktoro.com/blog, usually once a week.
Yeah, right. Well, thanks for being on the show. I look forward to catching up with you again.
Yeah, my pleasure, Richard. Thank you for having me.